Jeff Rosenzweig, a professor at Emory University's Goizueta Business School. In the summer of 2020, during the movement for more racial equity and more racial equality, for instance, wealth equality, there was a wonderful MBA student at Emory, Willie Sullivan, who conceived of the idea that we should have a John Lewis case competition. Congressman Lewis had just passed away. And we opened a competition for students across the nation, and something like 80 universities participated. Willie was founder and managing director. It was so successful that here in 2022, during Martin Luther King Week, we're having the second annual competition. We have co-managing directors, Keegan Baird and Jasmine Burton. I'd like to thank the dean of the Goizueta Business School, Karen Sedatal, who has been very supportive of the case competition from the very beginning, as well as Professor Lynn Siegel, who has been the faculty advisor. Well, this year, we have a particular honor. The keynote speaker is Ambassador Andrew Young. Andrew Young is a true legend in the civil rights movement, being a leader for literally 70 years. Ambassador Young has had a career that has made him one of the most significant persons of the last 70 years. He was a pastor, a graduate of Howard University. He was the first Black person elected to Congress from the Deep South since the time of Reconstruction after the Civil War. Then under President Jimmy Carter, he became U.S. ambassador to the UN, and the two of them, President Jimmy Carter and Ambassador Young, really brought human rights back onto the center of the global stage. And Ambassador Young also then became a successful two-term mayor of Atlanta, helped lead the expansion of what is now the world's busiest airport. And after that, Ambassador Young helped Atlanta. He was the key catalyst to Atlanta winning the Centennial Olympic Games. Well, interestingly, Ambassador Young today is also a distinguished lecturer in the John Robson Program for Business, Public Policy, and Government that I am honored to direct at Goizueta Business School. In this program, we talk about the nexus of business and public policy. Well, interestingly, something that students have become interested in recently, social enterprise. Andrew Young was a pioneer in this. Decades ago, he formed Good Works International to bring together the benefits and the wealth creation, job creation of profit-making capitalist businesses with a social purpose. So as Ambassador Young speaks today, we'll understand that he was a forerunner of public-private partnerships for social good. Well, Ambassador Young is going to be interviewed by Natalie Allen, a globally respected television anchor. Natalie was a long-term anchor on CNN International, and before that, a very well-known and respected anchor on CNN. Recently, Natalie has moved to a national news network, Newsy, owned by the leading journalism company, EW Scripps. The feature of Newsy that makes it unique in today's environment is that it is nonpartisan. Well, I'm going to turn it over now to interview our keynote speaker, Ambassador Andrew Young. Natalie, take it away.
Well, I am so honored to welcome Ambassador Young to the program today. Ambassador, it's good to see you. Thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure.
Well, I want to start with the fact that we have both lectured in Emory's John Robson Program for Business, Public Policy, and Government. So my first question, Ambassador, for you is, how can business, not just government, be part of the solution to racial injustice and inequality?
Well, I think that business has taken the lead, and in Atlanta particularly, uh, before government got started, Coca-Cola, I think, came up with the slogan "City too busy to hate." Well, that was a business idea, but there was in the early '60s um, a meeting of 12 black and 12 white businessmen. It was called the Atlanta Forum, the Atlanta Economic Forum. And they took a look at this metropolitan area and they decided what needed to be done. And I remember in 1966, when all of the around the nation, cities were rioting, the Action Forum decided they didn't want riots in Atlanta. And they decided the way to do that was to stop it, was to create summer jobs. And I think it was something like 650 summer jobs were created within 10 days because the CEOs of these corporations got on the phone and called their suppliers and said, I need you to take 5 interns this summer. I need you to take 10 interns. And it didn't take them long to create a pool of 600 summer jobs. Now, that took kids out of high school who might have been hanging around the streets doing nothing, put them in shirts and ties, and they had to go to the office every Monday morning. Many of those students ended up interning for those companies later on. One of them that I know personally ended up as the vice president of the regional office in Kansas City of the company. Now, this was from '66 to the present. So that it was good for business to have an infusion of 600 bright high school juniors and seniors, and 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 I guess the people who started working with them ended up sticking, and it proved to be a great expansion of business. But business can make a decision. A CEO can pick up the phone and he can make a decision in 10 seconds and try it out on 2 or 3 people. And if it sounds good, he can move with it wherever he wants to. There's a lot more freedom. I learned in my first conflict racially was back in 1956 when the Klan in South Georgia wanted to, well, we were trying to run a voter registration drive and they wanted to block us, it seemed. But I went first to the mayor. He picked up the phone and called the 2 largest businesses. They're still there, Sunnyland Packing Company and Flowers Bakery. And those were the 2 largest employers. And the mayor, the business community said, we don't want any racial problems here. Let the Klan have its meeting on the courthouse steps, but make sure that the sheriff protects the voter registration drive that I was starting at my church that next Sunday afternoon. And so we were able to change the climate with 2 phone calls in the business community. And it's a lot. It takes 50% or more in the Congress now, 60% to make a decision. Any CEO can touch base with 2 or 3 people in his senior staff and 1 or 2 on the board and make a decision in a matter of minutes. So business is far more powerful in dealing with social change than government.
I also want to ask you now, I'm certain you have many stories you could share, but could you share a personal experience overcoming adversity and making a tremendous positive change in our world?
Now,
Try to pick one.
well, I don't know where to start. I never, I guess I don't think of adversity as a problem. Adversity is necessary for growth. So I've never seen adversity as a problem. I've seen adversity as an opportunity. And that's the way I would suggest that young people look at adversity. I knew when I walked in a classroom in a when I was the only Black student in the class, that maybe there was a little burden on me. But I took that as a challenge, and I learned that the best way to get along was, first of all, I'd speak to everybody, whether they spoke to me or not, starting with the teacher. It worries me when I go to Georgia State or Georgia Tech. And classes are pretty big now, and students don't know each other, and they don't know the teachers. And so the first thing you do in business, in any business relationship, is you've got to humanize it, and you've got to make friends so that people are not threatened by you, but at least you greet them with a smile and a hello. You can't imagine how important that is.
I want to ask you now, since this program is all about, John Lewis, I'm wondering if you could share a personal story about the man, something about him and about MLK that no one without your deep personal friendship would know.
Well, I think everybody knows the story of John Lewis starting out as a kid preaching to the chickens.
Yes. Yes, it's a great story.
What that says is that he always saw himself as a leader. Even as a little boy, he led the chickens in the backyard. But also, I came south. I was working in New York at the National Council of Churches. Had a very good job, I thought. And my wife and I saw John Lewis on the Nashville sit-in story on NBC. And while we were sitting there, relaxed, just bought a new house, laying on the floor, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the Nashville sit-in story. At the first intermission, my wife looks at me and says, "It's time for us to go home." I said, "What do you mean?" I said, we just bought this house." She said, "Yeah, sell it."
Oh my.
I said, and do what?" She said, "I don't know. Sell this house, quit your job. It's time for us to go back home." I said, "But this is home." She said, "Not for me. Home is anywhere, south of, well, preferably Atlanta, New Orleans, somewhere along the deep south." And she said, "We need to be in the midst of this, doing something. We can't be in New York when the movement is going on in the South." So we actually sold the house.
How about that?
We hadn't owned it 6 months, and I sold it and quit my job and came back to Atlanta with no job, because, well, she was a teacher and she could get a job teaching very easily, and did. And pretty soon I got a job helping Martin Luther King. But it was the influence of John Lewis in the Nashville sit-in story that made us make a decision like that on the spot. And we had 2 children and one on the way.
Oh my goodness.
And her master's thesis was due in May. The baby was due in June, first week in June. And when we sold the house, we had to be out of it and headed back south by the 4th of July.
That's a tremendous story.
That's the influence of John
Mhm.
Lewis over the television, even.
Hmm.
Because you saw something in him that was just, he was a pure, loving, decent human being. And there was a power and an innocence about it that a genuine humility that was magnetic, that attracted you to him. Dr. King had the same sort of thing. And they got to know each other when John Lewis wrote him a letter in Montgomery while the Montgomery Improvement Association was going on. And Dr. King was so impressed with the letter that he answered it and sent him money to get a bus ticket to come to visit him a weekend and go to his church. And so Martin Luther King is responsible for John Lewis as a 13, 14-year-old getting involved in civil rights. Sending him the ticket even.
That's wonderful. Your wife saw it. MLK saw it. You made a big life change.
He was, he was nothing. I never saw him. There was nothing showboaty about it.
Mm-hmm.
He was always quiet. He was always serious. At a party, sometimes he had a few little dance moves, but everything was always so delicate and so understated. Well, I think if there's anything wrong with the world right now, just a genuine, loving human being that loved everybody.
Okay, Ambassador, here's another one for you. Very important, Ambassador. And it's this: I know your mission for your 90th year is to work on peace and reconciliation. How do you look at peace and reconciliation? And maybe the students can help with this mission.
It's that we're fragmented and we're divided on things that we don't need to be divided on. And I decided that one of the things that I should do, well, actually, I didn't start it for my 90th birthday. I almost started after the Olympics and after my time in politics. At 75, I figured I needed to think about what I'm going to do when I have to face my maker. Dr. King used to say the ultimate democracy is death. Everybody is going to die. There's nobody that's going to escape it. And he was not afraid of that. He'd say, you're going to have to answer to your creator sometime. And so when I started getting past 75, I formed a foundation, and I said, I'm going to be asked, did I feed the hungry, clothe the naked, heal the sick? Now, for some people, that might mean just running a soup kitchen or passing out sandwiches to people who are in need. But for me, it means, how do you plan to feed a world with 9 billion people? And we have the mechanism with which we're feeding 7 billion now is inadequate. We still have almost 1 billion people that are not getting enough food. And so the crisis is, how are we going to feed the world? And I found some things I started working on, well, duckweed is something that grows all over the world. And it doubles its weight every 48 hours. It mostly grows in swamps and creeks. It's all over Tennessee and all over Mississippi, all over Georgia.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody pays any attention to it. They consider it a nuisance. It's sort of like kudzu, but only it's tiny little leaves and it's pretty. But it could feed the world if we learn how to grow it, because it's 55% protein, and it has all 18 essential immediate amino acids, and it grows all over the world. So we've been working on research on how to grow and produce enough duckweed, or it's a lemna protein. That led us to new methods of growing food. And the Dutch, Holland, is only about the size of Connecticut. But they are the second largest exporter of food to the United States. And they grow food in water. You can grow a head of lettuce in 6 weeks in water, but it'd take you almost 6 months in dirt. And they have mechanized farming through hydroponics and aquaponics. In aquaponics, you use the fish and the growing area are mixed together. And so those are things that our foundation has been doing research on. The other thing is that because we think it's, well, one, it's necessary, and the problems that I think with Maynard Jackson, we found a way to build the Atlanta airport. Now, the thing about the Atlanta airport is there's no taxpayer money. We didn't go to Washington. So, we went to Wall Street and we floated tax-exempt municipal bonds. And we almost created close to $23 billion out of nothing, out of an idea. See? But that idea now is the busiest airport in the world and has 110 million passengers coming through it every year. I'd like to do the same thing with the Port of Savannah. Well, you're Memphis, but over in East Tennessee, Lookout Mountain goes underground, and Lookout Mountain, the rock ledge that's under Lookout Mountain is also under Atlanta.
How about that?
If you go on the Atlanta subway, MARTA, when you get downtown, we bored through solid rock with MARTA. We didn't open it up and drop it in. We bored through that solid rock extends 300 miles out into the Atlantic Ocean. And that's the continental shelf. We've been looking at building a port 20 miles offshore that would serve Jacksonville, Brunswick, Savannah, Charleston, right on up from everything from Florida to North Carolina would be coming through the harbor that we've been working on. And but if we do it like we did the airport, with no taxpayer money, and it's offshore, attract money from all over the world.
Absolutely.
And it will pay for itself. But then I would like, the one thing we didn't do with the airport, if we had said that we'd like to put 2% of the airport's earnings, the airport's earnings this year are something like $66 billion.
My goodness.
If we had 2% of that and put it into something like developmental education for kids, or creative programs in colleges for people who can't afford to go to graduate school but ought to. I mean, there's a way to make a business venture also, instead of paying taxes, contribute to the common good with its profits. But it's trying to think of things in a different way and be more creative and actually get more money down to the bottom to more people. If it was, a private sector design thing, you get the very rich, richer, and then they pay taxes. It's better, I think, if we design a thing so that it generates wealth in jobs and in contributions to the creative visions of society. And I don't know what those are. And whatever somebody thinks they are will change next year or next week, maybe. You can't say how, when, or why you die. You can only choose what is it you want to give your life for. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
Take your wildest dreams and try to set them in motion. Private citizen with with nothing. And Billy Payne, I don't know whether you know Billy.
Sure.
But we had an idea of putting together the Olympics. And we raised $2.5 billion privately. There was no taxpayer money in the Olympics. And everybody made money. We probably had an economic impact of over $5 billion.
Goodness.
And so we gave money back to the city rather than taking any money from the city, state, or federal government. So there's no taxpayer money in the Olympics. And there was no taxpayer money in the airport. And so I've been trying to find ways to make progress pay for itself and support everything else. And that's, there's no cost to dreams.
I want to ask you this. I'm going to ask you a question that I'm looking for one word from you, Ambassador. And it's this: you have achieved great success in your life as well as your career. Is there one word, or what one word would you choose as a guidepost for students who want to succeed?
Well, can I have two?
I'll grant you two. I'll grant you two. Sure thing.
Okay. I would say the first is vision, and the second is courage. That it doesn't pay to be courageous and dumb
That's
and
true.
wrong. I think courage requires a guideline vision. And those are the two words that I would hold on to. Courage, Maya Angelou said that courage is the most important virtue, because without courage, none of the other virtues ever get implemented.
How important is student leadership in achieving the good work so needed in this world?
Well, we wouldn't have a civil rights movement without students. And because students have the courage and the vision, but they also have the opportunity. I mean, you will never get another opportunity in life that you have in school, that you're with people, many of them 5, 6, 10 years, and you have a chance to grow up together. And the good work comes, and it's easier when you have the least to lose. Like I had to give up a job. You don't have to, very seldom do you get put out of school for doing something of kind in a conscience.
Mhm.
But it's also good to get organized and be able to do it. If you go to see the president of the college with a committee of 5 or 6, you're more likely to be heard than if you just jump up by yourself. So being a student leader requires some organization. It requires some discipline. And in the sit-ins, when the students here in Atlanta went to the college presidents, they said, we agree with you, but before you make any action, we want you to sit down together and write down what it is you're trying to achieve. And then they paid to put the ad in the newspaper, a whole page ad. But that gave them a chance to focus on and to discipline their values and their vision.
Thank you. I've got one final question for you, and that's again about students. What would you recommend that students who want to be leaders in fostering equity do now to try and make a larger positive impact down the road?
Well, let me say that, let me start with me and Martin Luther King.
Sounds good.
We didn't do much as students. I mean, I don't think he was ever in a demonstration as a student, and neither was I. We had fun. I mean, college was a ball.
It should be. It should be a little of that for sure.
And I frankly think that learning to build friendships, involved in sports and parties um, and 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 passing your courses is a full-time job. And I don't want to make anybody feel guilty because they're not a student leader. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't be a leader as an adult, but you will know when your time comes. Um, I have 4 children that are, of course, all grown now. I don't think any of them were student leaders, but they're all leaders now.
Okay.
And so you don't have to put yourself under the pressure.
Mhm.
Now, there's some natural people with natural leadership ability. And John Lewis was one of those. But it was also true that nobody invited him to join a fraternity. I mean, he was quiet and shy, and his leadership was expressed in the civil rights movement.
Right.
See? But in college, I think Martin Luther King he was probably more of a playboy. But again, he finished college at 19. So it's different. I went to college very young too, and like David Dinkins, the mayor of New York, had just come back from the military. Well, he was 20, and I was 16. No, he was 22, when I was 16. And so we were both involved in campus activities. He was a leader, and I was having a ball.
That's a good one to end on, because you've got to be you got to have some variety and be wide ranging and versatile. That matters too, doesn't it? Well, we appreciate you so much, your time, your service, and certainly your vision and your courage, Ambassador. Thank you so much for being a part of this program.
Thank you.
Ambassador, this is Jeff Rosenzweig. Thank you for the times you've spoken in the John Robson program. I'm a faculty member at Emory, but I'd like to thank Lynn Siegel, the faculty advisor, and Willie Sullivan, who conceived of this. But Ambassador, I've had the chance to read all your books, such as No Way Out, and your book on, you have a very major volume on the civil rights movement, as well as going to learn about the Andrew Young Foundation. Could you recommend one or two of your books and maybe one or two other books that you would like students to read?
Well, my first book, A Way Out of No Way, is about it's about my awakening as a human being. Coming out of college with a degree and knowing how stupid I really am, and realizing I'm never going to make it in life on the basis of this piece of paper that I've just spent, my life and life's work, money of my parents, and I still don't know anything. So, but it describes how I think I plugged into the universe. That it was a simple awakening, running back from, coming back from Howard University in Washington. We stopped in North Carolina, and I ended up running to the top of a mountain, Kings Mountain. And it dawned on me, I'm nothing, but everything around me has a purpose. And whoever created everything around this mountain, with a purpose, could not have created this earth without a purpose for me. And so that purpose is something that I don't need to know the long run. I just need to know one day at a time. What is it that I should be doing that nobody else can do? And I think there's a plan for every human being's life. But you kind of have to focus in on that and be willing to be led by some of the crazy ideas that you'll come up with. Like most of those, none of the think tanks are thinking like that, pretty much. But anyway, that's my answer.
The book meant a lot to me, and I'm going to have Natalie Allen wrap this up. I want to thank our Dean, Karen Sedadol, for her.
I should say, though, forgive me,
please.
I should say that we just reissued the book An Easy Burden.
That's right.
Because it was out of print. And I think it's back in print now, because I thought that a lot of young people who were in Black Lives Matter, what I tried to do in An Easy Burden was take the civil rights movement and spell out, point by point, how we developed it. And it's a story of the 60s. And it stops. Well, the last time I met with Martin Luther King before he went to Memphis, he said, we've got to take the energy and vitality of the civil rights movement and find a way to put it into politics. And that's sort of what led me into politics. We also have another book called The Making of Modern Atlanta that talks about how we took the movement into politics in Atlanta.
I've read all three books, and I want to recommend them. I want to thank our Dean, Karen Sedadol, for her support of this, for Willie Sullivan for his vision. But Natalie Allen, I know that something called Newsy, a national network, recruited you away from CNN. Interestingly, Newsy is owned by Scripps, which now owns Bounce, which one of the founders of that wonderful station was Ambassador Young's son. But Natalie, we want to thank you on behalf of the faculty of Emory, and we'd like you to give your final words.
Oh, okay, husband. I'll do that. No, this is a real treat for me, somebody that grew up in the Deep South, lived in Memphis, went to school in Mississippi, families from Mississippi, wound up in Atlanta to be with Ambassador and to celebrate John Lewis and all the icons from that era that are helping students today with their endeavors. This is wonderful. Thank you again, Ambassador.
Thank you.
We really appreciate